I'm going to share with you A Series of Unfortunate Events, a book by Lemony Snicket. Chapter 1. The book you're holding in your hands right now, assuming that you are in fact holding this book, and that you have only two hands, is one of two books in the world that will show you the difference between the word nervous and the word anxious. The other book, of course, is the dictionary, and if I were you, I would read that book instead. Like this book, the dictionary shows you that the word nervous means worried about something. You might feel nervous, for instance, if you were served prune ice cream for dessert, because you would be worried that it would taste awful. Whereas the word anxious means troubled by disturbing suspense, which you might feel if you were served a live alligator for dessert, because you would be troubled by the disturbing suspense about whether you could eat your dessert or it would eat you. But unlike this book, the dictionary also discusses words that are far more pleasant to contemplate. The word bubble is in the dictionary, for instance, as is the word peacock, the word vacation, and the words the author's execution, has, been, canceled, which make up a sentence that is always pleasant to hear. So if you were to read the dictionary rather than this book, you could skip the parts about nervous and anxious and read about things that wouldn't keep you up all night long, weeping and tearing out your hair. But this book is not a dictionary, and if you were to skip the parts about nervous and anxious in this book, you would be skipping the most pleasant sections in the entire story. Nowhere in this book shall you find the words bubble, peacock, vacation, or, unfortunately for me, anything about execution being canceled. Instead, I'm sorry to say you will find the words grief, despair, and woeful, as well as the phrases dark passageway, Count Olaf in disguise, and the Baudelaire orphans were trapped, plus an assortment of miserable words and phrases that I cannot bring myself to write down. In short, reading a dictionary might make you feel nervous because you would worry about finding it very boring, but reading this book will make you feel anxious because you will be troubled by the disturbing suspense in which the Baudelaire orphans find themselves. And if I were you, I would drop this book right out of your two or more hands and end up with a dictionary instead, because all the miserable words I might use to describe these unfortunate events are about to reach your eyes. I imagine you must be nervous, Mr. Poe said. Mr. Poe was a banker who had been put in charge of the Baudelaire orphans following the death of their parents in a horrible fire. I am sorry to say that Mr. Poe had not been a very good job so far, and that the Baudelaires had learned that the only thing they could rely on with Mr. Poe was that he always had a cough. Sure enough, as soon as he finished his sentence, he took out his white handkerchief and coughed into it. The flash of white cotton was practically the only thing that Baudelaire orphans could see. Violet, Klaus, and Sonny were standing with Mr. Poe in front of an enormous apartment building on Dark Avenue, a street in one of the fanciest districts in the city. Although Dark Avenue was just a few blocks away from where the Baudelaire mansion had been, the three children had never been in this neighborhood before, and they had assumed that the dark in Dark Avenue was simply a name and nothing more. The way a street called George Washington Boulevard does not necessarily indicate that George Washington lives there, or the way 6th Street has been divided into 6 equal parts. But this afternoon, the Baudelaires realized that Dark Avenue was more than a name. It was an appropriate description. Rather than street lamps placed at irregular intervals along the sidewalk were enormous trees, the likes of which the children had never seen before, and which they could scarcely see now. High above a thick and prickly trunk, the branches of the trees drooped down like laundry hung out to dry, spreading their wide, flat leaves out in every direction, like a low, leafy ceiling over the Baudelaire's head. This ceiling blocked out all the light from above, so even though it was the middle of the afternoon, the street looked as dark as evening, if a bit greener. It was hardly a good way to make 3 orphans feel welcome as they approached their new home. "You have nothing to be nervous about," Mr. Poe said, putting his handkerchief back in his pocket. "I realize some of your previous guardians have caused a little trouble. But I schooled Duncan Querney as a reporter